Okay, in the drawing manual, if you flip to this page, this is from the drawing manual. If you flip through the pages we've kind of covered so far to get to this page, this is we're going to be working on a series of shapes that have to do with the benchmark drawing that I had you do. Okay, so for instance, this could represent the plate that you did, right? Now, what this really truly represents is a circular shape, but then foreshortened, okay? Now, learning how to draw that shape is really important because it happens frequently, okay? Now, so we're going to start with ellipses and work on that through these next several exercises and to applying it to actual objects in space. And then we're going to work on these shapes. And these have to do with looking at objects such as rectangles, let's say just even my iPhone here, and then how they look in space in terms of what happens to them when you see those foreshortened, right? So we'll then work on that shape in terms of some exercises, in terms of what you can do to help you learn to see and draw these angles, which is a pretty useful thing called sighting. And then again, apply those to objects in space, okay, such as this. Then we'll work our way over to this one, which is a little more to another level of difficulty, which instead of looking at it like this, now we're looking at it like this, which is more along what I had you do when you were doing your benchmark drawing, okay? Then we're going to apply that to a series of other shapes. They're doing the same thing, okay? And that'll be it, okay? So we're going to be focused on things that are basically circular, foreshortened, and then things that are rectangular and foreshortened, okay? So this shape happens a lot in nature. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say nature, but in our man-made environment. We have things that are circular all around us in our man-made world. Sometimes it does happen in nature. I can think of the iris of the eye. So if you're looking at someone's eye from the side, if this was a huge eyeball, think of that circular kind of the iris, and you got that kind of pupil in the middle. This would be something that really you got to be able to draw really well for someone's eye. If you got off on that and it looked all wonky and wobbly, then something will look really strange. So learning how to draw this shape and do it with precision is pretty good. Now, no, we're not robots. We're not machines. We can't make perfect circles necessarily, but we can make something pretty precise, okay? And there's some parts to this I want to show you and things that you don't want to do, okay? So let me show you what you don't want to do, okay? Essentially, what I see that are kind of mistakes in doing this, I'll just set it right there, is I'll see students draw this where they'll do sort of this. Well, let me just break it down into its parts, okay? So if I do this, I do this on the ends. We'll just kind of hook around and then repeat that arc. Okay, there's that shape basically. It's basically 4 parts. Okay, so you got this part on each end, and they're basically the same part except flipped, right? And this too, where it's just essentially flipped. So it's really just 2 parts. They're just sort of flipped. Okay. This part is probably about the hardest one that most students have. Okay. So what I'll typically see a lot of students do is they may get the arc part of this, but then they struggle with this part. They'll kind of crease it to where it's just kind of crimped right there on the ends. So you don't want to do that one. Okay. That doesn't look very much like what we see here. Right. Okay. And then also what you don't want to do, I often see students, is they'll do something where the arc of this part is kind of flat, and then kind of flat, and then they'll do sort of this big half circle. Keep it like a circle right there on the end. It's kind of like a circle that's just been cut in half, right? And so I'll see that, right? And that doesn't look quite right. That looks kind of compressed and squished right there, and then flattened out, and then too big of a circle there. So that's not right either. Now I can say there is something that is good about these that are going on with them, and that's that they are symmetrical. Okay. Now if you look at this one, it really should be symmetrical. So get this in focus. Symmetrical from top to bottom, and then symmetrical from left to right. If I can get this in focus. Okay, there we go. So as you can see here, it's symmetrical from top to bottom, and then also from left to right. Okay, so each quadrant or corner is really repeated, in which we can say that is true for these two. So if I go across here, top to bottom, symmetrical. If I go across the middle, right here, left to right, is symmetrical. Okay. Same thing with this one. Cut across the middle, symmetrical top to bottom. Cut down through the middle, left to right, it's fairly symmetrical. Okay, so it is doing that, but it's just not quite right. Okay. All right. So, other problem I've seen, okay, in doing this, is when students will just kind of do something that looks just kind of wonky. Or just kind of put something ovalish like that, right? It's kind of a mixture of this and that and with everything, you know, it's kind of flat and then it kind of gets kind of curved and it kind of goes like there. So it's just kind of all flimsy looking, right? So when I do this, I mean, it is not symmetrical from top to bottom, and it's not symmetrical left to right either. So none of these are equal, you know, in terms of identical. In terms of if you flipped it and then flipped it and then flipped it again, they would not be the same. Okay, so this also you wouldn't want to have. Okay, it looks too organic. It doesn't look like a geometric circular shape. Okay? Alright, so let's get into the actual practice of drawing this. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to repeat this large ellipse shape. It's called an ellipse. I want you to repeat it twice on this piece of paper. Okay? Now, if you don't have this piece of paper, essentially you just have to take a scratch piece of paper and then try to draw it twice. Okay? And try to draw it large. So to do this, when I do it, I'm going to demonstrate how I do it to kind of, the way I do it is I kind of, in the end, I end up kind of sculpting it, okay? I don't just make this quick sort of drawing and there I go. No, I ended up with something like that, right? So I don't want to do anything too fast or fluid like that. That's just not going to get you anything very precise. As much as I might try, I might get it at some point, but that's not going to cut it. Okay? That ends up more like what this is. Okay? That gets close, but still, it's just not going to work. Okay? So what I find better is doing this really quick, fluid kind of mark, which is you're not going to get very good accuracy that way, is I kind of sculpt it out. I kind of stretch the line out. So I can just kind of do it in a much more cautious, calculated, searching way of doing it, okay? Get much better results. The line isn't as confident as that, but it's more precise in its shape, okay? So let me demonstrate here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to arc my line, kind of repeating what this is doing. Now I'm going to really focus on doing this kind of part right here. Now that's a tricky part, because it's, again, it's not like a half circle like this, right? It's more like something like that, right? So it kind of wants to kind of stretch out going this way and then this way, so it kind of stays open, but then it kind of starts to come in right here. But this is where I think students mistaken, where it just kind of cuts in too much like that. So you want to be careful that you not just kind of come in and then make that too pointed, okay? So you want something in between that and end up with something basically like that, okay? So see if I can get that part. So you see I'm kind of being sketchy with it. Kind of drawing and redrawing. And then I'm going to show you my process to go back and clean that up. So come over here. Try to repeat the same kind of curve as I've got over here. This might end up a little more curved than this one. Okay. And then I'm just going to try to repeat this arc down below. Now sometimes, if it makes you feel better, you can do it this way because your hand naturally wants to go like this, right? I got that a little too pinched there. Whoops. Okay. Now as you can see, this is not clean, but it's pretty precise. Okay. So what I do to clean this up is what I'll do is I'll start to kind of then do sort of a sculpting. And sculpting, there's an additive and subtractive. So think about when I was putting that line down, that was sort of an additive process. Now I'm going to do a subtractive process with my eraser. I'm not using my eraser to just fix my mistakes. I'm using it to kind of hone it in. So I'm subtracting some of what I have there. I think I see something that's good about what I have. So I'm going to try to leave it, just kind of trim it up some. Okay, now what I will do actually, in the end, sometimes when I really want to make this look clean, is I'll erase it to the point where it's just sort of a ghost image left, right? So I kind of cleaned it up a little bit. Now I'm kind of lightly erasing it. So I have just a slight impression of it left. Now what that's going to allow me to do is go back and then get us back in focus. Come on, focus. Get this thing to focus. Okay, there we go. All right, so what we have here is sort of a little ghost image left, right? Then what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to go very confidently now over that to have this very clean, mechanical, confident kind of line. And kind of mechanical, if you think about things that are geometric like a circle, geometry, they are fairly mechanical. So if you want something fairly mechanical, that's a good way to do it. And you can always go back again, keep touching it up, until it just feels perfect. And as perfect as you can get it, right? Well, focus again. Okay, come on, get back in focus. I think when I make quick movements, this thing loses focus. Okay, getting back in focus. Come on, focus. All right, there we are. Got it back in focus. So, as you can see there, it's pretty clean. Okay, fairly precise. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it feels pretty much a good representation of that. I may have closed it up a little too much. Okay, so what I want you to do is practice that twice. Okay, so draw that twice. I want you to do another one here after you do one. So 2 on this page. Okay, again, if you don't have this page, just turn in a picture of 2 large elliptical practices by looking at this. Now I'll post this on the Canvas page. Alright, so I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to flip this over to the back because we're going to practice something here. Okay, well actually let me just go ahead and show you this one first. Okay, this one is essentially what an ellipse can look like in different viewpoints. Okay, and what I mean by different viewpoints, so imagine if this was sitting on a table and I was looking at it straight on from the edge. This is probably what I see for this opening, right? It's just flat, straight across. But if I start to stand up, right, and start to look down on the inside of this cup, then I start to see something about like that. Then if I start to stand up further, right, then I see something like that. And then as much as I kind of kept standing up and looking down over into this, eventually I would end up with something like this, right? Where I'm looking straight down on top of this, right? But again, if I sat back down and got to where this thing was like eye level with me, then that's what I would see. Okay. Now this goes for things like David could be this way. Like imagine if a car was coming straight at you, where the tires like that, and as the car started to turn, you start to see more of the wheel of the car, right? And also this could go this way. So imagine if I don't know, there was a light and you were kind of looking at it, and then you walked up under the light and looked up at the ceiling, and then you saw something like that. So this can go many different ways, any type of circle that you see in terms of how that shape could look. Okay, so all I want you to do, now this one is much like the one we already practiced, right? But now I want you to try to practice one where it's even more foreshortened, even more squished. When I say foreshortened, see how that's shortened from that down to that? That's what foreshortened means. Now the sides stayed the same, right? But just this part foreshortened, right? That's called foreshortening. Just like take my hand and then point it towards you, my fingers shorten, right? So that's foreshortening. So it happens in perspective, okay, in your viewpoint. So what I want you to do, this one's really easy. You just draw a straight line, right? This one, a really foreshortened ellipse, and just start opening up until you get to a circle. Now I realize these parts, they start really changing. They start kind of opening up more and more, and then they turn into a circle. All right. Okay, so just do the best you can with that. Now for this, okay, I want you to do this based on my demonstration, okay? Basically, I can see through the paper this ellipse right here, so I'm just going to trace that just for the purposes of saving time, okay? What we're going to create is a cylinder with this, okay? So if you don't have the paper where you can see the ellipse on the other side, you'll have to kind of freehand one yourself, but make it an ellipse like the ones we practiced. Make it large, okay? And tracing is okay for this because we're just using it. The main part is what we're going to do below it, okay? And we're going to create a cylinder, like a can or something, okay? So what we want to do is draw a line coming straight down from this side, from this edge or the end of the ellipse. Draw a line coming straight down there. I can look at the edge of the paper, how to make it straight, and I can look at the edge of the paper here to determine what would be a vertical, okay? So, what we're going to do is complete this into, let's say it's going to be a can, okay? So it's got the opening here, we can be able to see down inside the can. We just need to put a bottom on this, okay? So how are we going to do that, okay? So let me show you how not to do this, okay? So sometimes I'll see students, they'll attempt to make a curve, then they'll just kind of flatten it out, okay? That looks wonky, okay? That looks weird. Looks kind of 2D versus 3D. This looks 3D, this looks 2D, okay? So you don't want to do that. Now the other problem I'll see students do is they'll kind of get into this arc, right? But then they'll do something that looks like this. So it's not flat, right? But when you get to the ends right here, this happens, okay? It's like an intersection. It's like, you know, it's not quite that, but it's getting there close to that, where you have this kind of corner, okay? So it really shouldn't be a corner when you have this happen, okay? Really what we want is something that looks just similar to this, where it just merges, okay? So I often talk about with students because, you know, you're already getting to be of driving age, and, you know, if you're merging onto traffic onto a highway, right? Let's say you're getting on an on-ramp to a highway. Let's say um, you're coming down your on-ramp, right? And here's your highway, right? And say you're coming down an on-ramp, you're coming this way and you're going perpendicular, then you got a curve, and you're coming onto an on-ramp. You're doing probably, you know, they're doing like, let's say 55 miles an hour, right? And you want to be able to just merge onto that with that speed. So you need to be doing about 50 to 55 miles an hour by the time you get to here, just so you can merge on here. So you don't need to make like this junction where it's kind of like, you know, you got to go then turn, right? You want to make it more fluid, right? To where when you make that turn. So the same thing what we're about to do, okay? If this makes any sense. So if I was to erase this. Okay, so if you go this, then curve it, then curve like that, right? So there's no corner involved in that whatsoever, okay? So let me demonstrate. Alright, so if I want to make the bottom on this, first of all, I really want to repeat this arc, okay? Just know that, okay? So first thing I'm going to do is start following this line and then start curving. Then start to make kind of a drastic curve. Okay, that's kind of what that's doing, right? So now I'll repeat this arc. And then when I come over to this line, I want to do the same thing. It's kind of like I'm coming towards it, and then start to turn, until eventually I'm in line with it. So this is a very tricky part, for sure. Now trying to keep that and get that symmetrical is tricky. A little too much of a corner there. Curve it just a little more, okay? All right, so there we go, okay? That's how you want it. No corners, no flat, no angles in the corner, okay? So I want you to take a picture of this. I want you to turn this in, okay? Along with what you've done here with these two. Then I want you to take a picture of this, what you've done repeating this beside of it, turn that in, okay? Now we're ready for an object using what we've learned, okay? So for this, you're going to need a scrap piece of paper, okay? Now, in the future, I really should have left blank spaces here so you could have drawn this over here like I did for these. I left the space right here where you could just draw it right there, okay? But I just didn't do it for this, okay? So you're going to need a blank sheet of paper. Now I want you to draw each one of these. So what's happening here is I took this object, placed it in front of me, and then what I did is I turned it, okay? And then I kept turning it. And then I kept turning it. until it's kind of pointing directly straight at me, okay? So what we should see here is essentially some of what we're practicing when you're doing this, right? So you start to see a really foreshortened ellipse, starts getting a little more open, a little more open, a little more circular, pretty circular, not quite circular completely, but then circular, okay? Now, here's the tricky part. You know, we just did the cylinder like that, correct? But the thing about this, we have a little bit of linear perspective going on here, okay? And here's what makes this tricky, okay? This angle, right, it gets different here, okay? It's not parallel, it's parallel here. You see this horizontal is parallel. We're looking at it straight on. But now that this is turned towards us a little bit, and this gets a little foreshortened in terms of the length of it, look what happens to the space here versus what happens to the space here, okay? It gets decreased, right? So it squishes here, widens here, okay? So I really want to see that, so you can really see that extreme right here. So you can see how it's really wide, and then it tapers down as you come down the length of this. So it's really wide, and it starts to taper down, okay? So, all right, so I'm going to demonstrate a couple of these, okay? So for this one, you can start out by basically doing these sort of flat lines like that. Now remember, what I demonstrated, you don't want to do anything that kind of gets very circular, then goes flat, right? That wouldn't represent that. And we don't want to do something where it just kind of looks like there's a corner, right? We don't want that either. Although that looks close. We want to have a slight curve, then an arc, then a slight curve juncture there. It's a very subtle thing, right? On this end, basically about the same thing. Okay. Now, when you get to this one, I will demonstrate something that can be very, very helpful for you, okay? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this angle. So, how do I draw that angle? Well, I could just put down an angle, just sort of guess, but then I can check myself, okay? Here's a little trick. If you take your pencil and then hold it out in the same angle as that and bring it down, then you can check yourself. Now, by looking at that, I got a little off on it. I got a little too angled. So how about that one? So line it up, bring it down, see if that lines up. I did pretty good there. Now, I'm doing this suspended off the paper, but you can also lay it down on the paper, and then come down, pick it up, and then lay it down on the paper. Okay? So now I have this angle pretty good. Artists do that all the time. That's how they learn. It's called sighting. Okay? So now I feel comfortable enough where I can go ahead and draw this on this end. Now I'm ready to draw this angle. Okay, so what I can do before I even start, I can kind of lay this here, then bring this down here like that, just so I can get some indicator. I also want to look, and let's see how I did here. Let's line this up. That looks pretty good. Okay. All right. It's a very subtle taper, so this can really help you pick that up in terms of laying this on here to find accuracy. Okay, I've learned this doing learn how to draw people. Okay, trying to draw figures, things that are in space, so rooms, anything that's at an angle to you. This is a good trick to do to be able to line up a pencil in front of you and then line it up on your object. Okay, so now we're going to attempt to close this up with a good ellipse. Okay, so what I want you to do is repeat this. Okay, finish these, don't have to shade them. All I want is the contour line drawing, that's all I want. You'll have to do it on a separate sheet of paper because I didn't leave you space beside of it, okay? So I want you to complete that, photograph it, turn it in. So if I complete all these, I've photographed and turned it in, okay? Now we're to this, okay? Now, that one's simple, easy, right? I'm just going to draw a flat line right next to it, okay? So I want you to draw these right next to it, basically like what you did with the ellipses, right? Just kind of draw these right beside the space that I've allowed right here beside of you on this sheet. And so you'll just draw a flat line there. And then for this one, right? So for this one, what's important is if when I would use a scrap piece so I don't have to draw on my packet here. So if I'm going to draw this one, I'll just draw a flat line across, draw about the same length, and then we'll draw this angle. So just what I learned from what I just demonstrated, I could draw an angle, then I can check it. So let's see how I did there. Not that good. It needs to be a little more of an angle like that, right? So let me erase that. So let me fix it. Let me bring it more extreme at an angle like that. Let's see how that works. So let me bring this over here. Aha. Better. Okay. I'm going to try to repeat this one over here. See how I did. That feels pretty good. Okay. So now close this up. And then I've got that shape. Okay. So I know it's a really weird shape. Thinking that you're actually looking at a rectangle, but then how it looks, foreshortened to you. Okay. So you don't need to use a ruler. Just try to freehand it, okay? Once you get used to trying to draw things without a mechanical aid, okay? So what I want you to do, you don't have to shade this in or anything. All I want is the contour. And you just repeat those beside it. Now this one's obviously easy. It's just a rectangle, okay? Parallel lines, verticals, horizontals, 90-degree angles. But then when you get to this, don't be fooled. That's not a 90-degree angle. Okay? And this side's not parallel to this one. Now the top and bottom's parallel. They're parallel to one another. But these sides aren't anymore. They start to kind of push in. And as you start to kind of look more and more, they start to push in more and more in terms of those angles. Okay? Alright, so complete that. Now we're looking at basically these objects using what we've learned here. Okay? So if you look at this rectangle, essentially that's what we're looking at straight on from the side. That's fine. Just draw your rectangle straight on from the side. Now, once this starts to turn, right, we're getting a little situation here on this shape. It's starting to be like this shape. And then this shape, now we can see it, now it's turned towards us, kind of like this shape, okay? So if I just kind of turn this like this, right? So if you imagine a box straight on from the side right here, and then as you start to see the side of the box, right? Just had a box close by. Now I'll show you. So, well, unfortunately I don't. So, mine just use my iPhone again, I guess. So if you got, your box straight on here, as you start to come here, then you start to come here, 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 and then finally here, right? In terms of how you're looking at it, okay? All right, so I'll demonstrate one of them, okay? Now here's the tricky part. I think this is probably the trickier one. And I'm just going to use exactly the same things I kind of learned as I was doing this, okay? So, the thing to remember about this, these verticals are pretty much vertical. That one tilts a little bit. They're, for the most part, the verticals remain vertical, okay? It's only when you get to the top and bottom parts that they slant, okay? Now, I don't know if you know anything about linear perspective. That's essentially what we have going on here. We have 2-point perspective going on here, okay? But we'll get into that later. All right, so how would I start this? I'm going to start with this. This is the part that's closest to me, okay? So I'm going to, this is a vertical. So as long as I draw a vertical line, I'll be fine. Okay, so that's what that represents. Now I'm going to try to draw this slant. So let me see if I can draw that. Need something about in between those. Now you get better and better that you won't need to continue to do that. You just kind of understand that this happens, how these kind of angles work with shapes in space. So now that I've got that, now I want to draw this. So I don't want to draw it here because that would make that too long. So I want to make it about the same kind of shape. And I feel like that works pretty good right there. So now all I got to do is draw this angle this way. Draw this angle this way. Check myself. Did pretty good on that. Okay. Now I got to figure out the length of that. I want to say that right there works. That feels pretty good. Okay. Now you don't have to draw all these lines here. They're inside the box here. That's fine. I just essentially want you to draw this shape. You don't need to shade it either. Okay. As long as you get that shape, that's all that matters. So you draw that right here, just as I did there. Okay. You put it right here. Okay. Then you can photograph that, turn it into me. So you do on the back side is the completion of this. right? So you keep drawing these, the side of it, and then finish that. Alright, now we're at the home stretch here, okay? We're in the advanced part here. These are hard shapes, okay? They're very much kind of these slivers. They're kind of small little slivers, and they're just kind of odd, okay? Because there's nothing parallel in this. And the other one, at least you had, this was parallel to that, this was parallel to that, right? This was parallel to that, top and bottom of that. And the other ones you did. There's nothing parallel about this, okay? This isn't parallel to that, okay? And this isn't parallel to that. So there's nothing parallel in this. So you can't go based on the idea of assumptions of what a rectangle is. Now that's a rectangle, granted. This is parallel to this. This is parallel to this, right? These are right angles. But then when you get to this, everything changes. This is off just a little bit. And this is off just a little bit, or actually quite a lot. And then these angles, although they look close to a 90 degree, they're not 90 degree, okay? This is greater than, this is less than, this is less than, this is greater than, okay? So these are acute, these are obtuse. Obtuse and acute, okay? All right, so, all right, let's see what we can do here with this. So let's do this one. Okay, this is pretty hard. So just like I did with the other ones, I'm going to attempt to draw. You could draw either one of these sides, but okay, let's do this one. The one that's closest to us. So I'm going to put my paper side of it. Of course, you can draw it right here on this paper, right? So what I'm going to do is attempt to put an angle and then the same length. Okay, that's good. I'm going to try to attempt to do this one. A little off there. Okay, that's good. I'm going to try this angle. That one's pretty good. Now I'm going to do this angle. Okay, so there we go. Weird shape, right? So really weird shape. Now what that represents is if you're looking at a rectangle with one corner kind of closer to you than the other. So I think that was a little more extreme, but you can kind of see it there. Okay. All right. Okay. So what I want you to do from here, complete those. Then you're going to do these, and these are the last ones, okay? So you're going to do these. This is basically a lot like the first one, okay? You're looking at it straight on, but you can see the top, not just the side. You can also see the top. So what that changes is, remember what I said about the verticals, always staying vertical? Look at these verticals. They're not vertical, okay? This angles, right? The verticals are no longer vertical. The verticals now angle. Everything about this is angled. There's nothing perpendicular. There's nothing parallel. There's no right angles. Now, this is the only one that is parallel. This right here is parallel. Okay, but that's it. Okay, until you get back over to this one. Then you got some parallels there. Okay, so what's happening to this box? This box is turning, 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 more like it's turning towards you. Turning, turning, turning until it's finally facing towards you, where this end is facing towards you. Okay? Alright? So what this is all doing is getting you used to looking at how things look in space. These geometric, simple objects that we live around are a man-made world of boxes and circles and cylinders. And really, why would you want to learn how to draw these things? Because they're very basic shapes. And if you can learn how to draw these basic shapes in space, then you could apply these principles to more complex shapes, such as the human figure, okay? Or any other object like a car, a building, furniture, any of those things, okay? So I could imagine if I was in a helicopter and I was looking down onto the building, this was a street or something, right? So if I put little windows and like a door there, right? Or let's say this was a car. If I put a little, um, top part on this and wheels on the side of this, and of course make it a little more maybe elongated a little bit, but still, yeah. I've seen students try to draw cars and like car hoods and things like that, and it has these shapes in there, and they just totally mess it up because they just don't understand what happens to these kind of shapes in space with foreshortening. Okay, so I'll attempt to draw this one for you, okay, or maybe this one, okay. Okay, I'll do this one, okay, as a demonstration. It'll be the last thing I'll demonstrate, okay. So I'm just using the same principles before. Of course, you got the spaces here you can draw in, but if you don't have this, I got it just posted on Canvas, then you'll have to just get your own separate sheet of paper. Now again, I can't go based on that these are verticals because they're angled, right? So I'm just going to start again with the one that's closest to me. Now that's good. By the way, when I do this, I don't have to put this down onto the paper. Okay, I can hold it above too and just let it hover. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to, let's say, do this angle. Okay, now I'm going to do this one. Now, as a general rule, one thing that can be helpful is to know that size diminishes the further away it gets. Okay, so what that tells me is this actually tapers here. This kind of slenders here because as things get further away, they get smaller. Such as how tall this one is. Look at it back there. Look how small that one is compared to that one. Things get smaller, so what that happens, that means this decreases. I couldn't tell you how much I often see students, when they draw these things, they'll do something like that, right? Where this actually increases, right? Instead of decreases. That's what generally happens most of the time when I see students make mistakes when drawing this. It's just a slight decrease, okay? So let me check my angle. Okay, that feels good. Now I need to close it up with this angle. I can't necessarily just repeat this one. Kind of tapers a little more. In terms of the angle of it, slants a little more. Everything's unique about this, okay, which makes it more difficult. Okay, so now I gotta draw this angle. draw this angle. Now this one I think you can notice a little bit more. Just how much closer it kind of tapers down through this way and widens this way. Now we'll draw this angle to complete the end of that. Okay, I'll draw this angle. Then complete it with this one. Again, you can see how much wider it is here and how much narrower it is here compared to here, right? So it's wider and then narrower. Wider, then narrower. It's wider and then narrower. So whatever's furthest away from us narrows. Anything that's closer to us widens. Okay? As long as you remember that and kind of apply those same ideas each time you draw this, you'll never end up with an instance where you end up with something that looks like this. Which I do see sometimes. Okay? Alright, so don't do that. Okay, this is why I'm showing you how to do this. You shouldn't end up with something like that if you're applying the principles that I showed you. Maybe that angle might be right, you know, but then we get to this angle, whoa, way off. Get this angle, whoa, way off. So often I see students draw it, they'll get one of the angles really good, they'll get it accurate with that one angle, and maybe they'll get this angle correct too. Right, just like that. But then they get really wonky with these. So if you're having mistakes with your drawing, really look at those angles, okay, in terms of what's going on. That's the often most mistakes I see in terms of trying to interpret what that looks like. As long as you stick to those, checking yourself, those angles, and apply these ideas that things that, you know, as this plane, this is a plane, okay? This iPhone is essentially a plane, okay? It's a plane, flat surface. But as things get closer to you, they get wider, right? As they get further away from you, they narrow, okay? As long as you apply those principles and those ideas, you won't have these kind of issues where what's closer to you becomes really narrow, and as they get further away from you, they get bigger, okay? Alright, so you don't want to do that, okay? So complete this, and that's it, okay? That'll be your work for the week.